The podcast you're listening to is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Library, where you can read the greatest stories in all of the multiverse. I am Jeremy.
And I am Jesse.
We are doing this show in conjunction with Second Union. For more of the latest headlines and entertainment, please go to our website at wearesecondunion.com. Joanna's not feeling too well tonight, so it's just the guys. Jesse, how are you?
I'm doing dandy today.
Dandy? Ooh, that's a fancy
Where
word
the
for
hell
you.
did that word come from?
I don't know, but I'm looking forward to the explanation.
I don't know. It just feels rather refreshing today. I don't know what's going on. It felt like a normal day, but I feel all right.
Okay, that's good. I'm actually sitting here. I just finished voting in the California primary, so we'll see what happens later tonight. However, I'm still a little bit down. I'm kind of tired because I made a last-minute trip on Sunday to go to Disneyland. They had a special running on tickets, and I decided to take advantage of it. And it's been my second weekend in the last 20 where I've had time to myself, so I thought I'd actually do something for myself. And being the first time I've gone there since April of last year, of course, one of the things high on my list was Galaxy's Edge, the Star Wars land.
Of course.
And I'm proud to say that on my first attempt at going, I managed to get on Rise of the Resistance. It was almost awkward because in the middle of the day, someone asked me, "Have you gone on Rise of the Resistance?" Yeah. Oh, what's it like? You mean you haven't gone? No, this is our fifth time trying. We finally got something later today. What's it like? Oh, I didn't realize this was hard. So that was just odd. But Galaxy's Edge is surprisingly brilliant. And I say that not as a Star Wars fan. I'll watch the movies, but I am not one of those guys who digs into lore and all that other stuff. And it's amazing how they built it, because there isn't too much of a straight path through Galaxy's Edge at all. It has a lot of those movie set style turns to make the place look a lot larger than it is. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's multi-tiered. The Millennium Falcon in it, I'm not sure if I'd say it's quite full scale. It's definitely at least half scale. It is big enough for someone to stand in that cockpit. It does not look like it's big enough for 6 people to fit in it. So, there's that. But walking around, it was really kind of incredible. All the cast members, the people that work in the park, they're in like land-appropriate costumes. Even the guys who are picking up the garbage and changing out the trash can liners are in full costume. There were stormtroopers at various points that I could see on upper gantryways just watching over things. I saw one cast member just quickly buzz by a bunch of kids, stop and kneel next to him and just said, "Hey, have you seen R2-D2? And they just kind of nodded. Most of them nodded, but a couple said no. And she just says, "When you see him, give him a message for me." And then she starts to whisper something to them. It was it was a nice little bit of role-playing.
Yeah.
The bazaar was really nice. I don't remember buying anything there. I did eat at the restaurant there, and the food is a little bit slapdash and bland. However, I think that's supposed to go with the theming of this section of the park. So I won't say that's my favorite. It was fine, but I've eaten better things in other parts of Disneyland. The Millennium Falcon ride, Smuggler's Run. Being a single rider has its advantages. I managed to get on that thing 3 times on Sunday.
Huh.
Lines also weren't terribly long. But I tried out all the jobs, and I found out something very interesting about myself.
That is?
Well, we had our best run when I was in one of the pilot seats. So that's nice to know I can fly adequately. I'm a pretty good gunner. However, I feel the most at home, oddly enough, in the engineer seat.
Yeah.
Just watching all the controls and making sure things are running properly. For some reason, that just clicks with my OCD. And I still had a good chance to watch everything happening from that vantage point. So I had the most fun in that seat, and I don't know why. But it is impressive to wait for your turn to get into the simulator while you're sitting in the lounging area of the Millennium Falcon, complete with that 3D chess table. A lot of people were stopping in there for selfies. Me, I was like poking around the walls and looking at all the stuff, you know.
Hmm.
But I lost a serious amount of time there, and it wasn't entirely because of the land. It's also because of the Play app. Disney has an app that's supposed to keep people busy while they're standing in lines. It has a special like extra program for Galaxy's Edge so that you can actually walk around, and there's a bunch of panels that you've seen in several of the films.
Hmm.
Just like, I don't know, door and technical panels. And using the app, you can walk around and actually, like, pseudo hack your way into these things so that you can help control the land of Galaxy's Edge and affect what's walking around during the day. You can either increase defenses so that's resistance oriented, install listening devices so it's more first order oriented, or you can just install credit skimmers for these fictional credits that you can get as a rogue or scoundrel. And depending on how many people do it and how many of these are oriented to one side or another, different characters could be walking around later in the day. The day I was there, more resistance people were hacking the panel, so Chewbacca was suddenly out at like 4 in the afternoon.
Huh.
It's really kind of cool. As a matter of fact, Smuggler's Run actually interacted with my phone in a surprising way. Each time I got on the ride, I wasn't using the app. But every time I got off and opened it up, all of a sudden I had a new title based on my performance in the ride. Somehow it kept fine enough track that not only did it give me the titles from my runs, it kept the scores. I don't know how it's interacting. There must be something Bluetooth oriented in the seats, but it definitely knew which one I was. That's just crazy.
Wow.
But it's really impressive. If you're a Star Wars... Actually, there's one other thing I have to say. While it's visually a treat, this is the first section of Disneyland that had like a definitive theme going in, really. You know, the others are all kind of put together on the fly. Rides that aren't always congruous or sitting next to each other as they were put in, right?
Hmm.
Even Toontown was just kind of a late add-on, and the only thing they really added there was some specific theming. But Galaxy's Edge actually has speakers running through it, so the whole place sounds like something straight out of Star Wars. I was walking by some shrubbery, not far past the entrances, and there were these growling sounds, like something huge was tromping around behind the foliage. As I went to the bathroom, and as I was using the faucet, there were these sounds piped in the room, like different panels were charging up or glitching and sparking out. Even the water reclamator, the hydration station, disguised as a water reclamator, would occasionally gurgle and just make these awkward sounds like it was getting ready to break down. And the most impressive thing was that every once in a while there's these hidden speakers that make it sound like either TIE fighters or X-Wings are flying overhead at high speed. And it fooled my senses enough where I would occasionally look up trying to see where these ships are. They did a lot of work to make you feel that this place is as authentic as possible. It's really cool. I regretted not sticking around long enough to see the fireworks display out there. I hear they have a separate one from the ones down Main Street, you know, the main Disneyland fireworks.
Hmm.
But it took a sudden cold and rainy turn, and I did not have an umbrella or heavy coat, so I decided to save myself for my health and, work. What do you think of all that, man? Because this is the first time I've really talked about what I saw there.
Feels very immersive. I kind of wish I was there.
It is a trip, It was almost disturbing to walk out of there back into Frontierland. It feels like two completely different places. It is something else. The subject of this week is Humanoid Comics, issues 1 through 5 of Ignited. This is another one of the latest independents out there. It started in late 2019, but we will get to that after the news of the week. And we will start with Marvel Comic news. This is where we talk about the intellectual properties owned by the House of Mouse and where they are headed in the upcoming months. And, you know what? It's actually getting kind of weird out there as far as Marvel Comics go. Thanks to the recent C2E2, the Chicago Comics and Entertainment Expo. Mm-hmm. One of the panels, it was revealed that one of Marvel's newer characters is getting their own ongoing series. Again, actually. Starting this July, Silk is getting her own series.
No.
The character had a prior ongoing not long after her debut in the Amazing Spider-Man comics, But this series will be written by Marlene Gu with art by Takeshi Miyazawa. It's going to have a cover by Stonehouse, and I'm not sure whom Stonehouse is. According to the early information from the convention, Cindy Moon, the real name of Silk, is going to be working for a new podcaster in New York City, J. Jonah Jameson. The writer Maureen Gu said at the convention, quote, "The opportunity to write a Korean-American superhero, a woman no less, is one that I never thought would come my way. I'm so excited to flex this writing muscle and to explore new stories for Silk, a character I love. Her fierceness and loyalty are qualities I understand and relate to, and I hope that readers feel the same as she fights new foes and protects old friends," unquote. I'm kind of digging that news. The character was used a lot very early on in her, after her debut, but then it became muddy. She was often in the background of other Spider-Man related stories, and it's kind of hard for a character based on another character to stand out when they're always around the character they're based on. I'm not sure that entirely made sense. I think it did.
No, I get it. It's like, well, here's the original and here's the copy.
Yeah.
That's very general. I'm generally.
I was about to say, Silk is a bit more than a copy. I mean, she was bitten by the exact same spider that bit Peter Parker. And she generates her own webbing. She does not need web shooters. There was a little bit of news about the Rise of the Skywalker film. There's a comic adaptation being put out by Marvel Comics. And it turns out that there were some deleted scenes from the film that will be put into the comic book adaptation. It's going to be written by Jody Houser with illustrations by Will Sliney. According to Houser, quote, "I think one of the great things about adaptations in other mediums is you do get the chance to build out elements of the story there may not have been time or place for on the screen. Giving light to new scenes gives the creators in these other mediums a chance to add to the story rather than just translating it for the page," unquote.
Sounds neat, but doesn't help the final product that was shown.
Who knows? I mean, I've always heard about some adaptations of original or movies that turn out to be better during these adaptations. I've had people tell me up and down that I need to retry Batman v Superman with the deleted scenes put in. Supposedly it helps. The only problem is that means I'd have to watch Batman v Superman again.
Mm-hmm.
And no, it's not because it's a DC film that I don't like it. I just don't like it because I didn't think it was a good movie. It's funny.
Agreed.
Huh?
I agree.
I mean, it is funny, and I know it's not trying to be funny, but it's really funny. But yeah, it didn't really appeal to me as a movie watcher. The Star Wars Rise of the Skywalker adaptation #1 is coming out this June from Marvel Comics. I don't have an exact date on its release. As a matter of fact, as an aside, while I was in Galaxy's Edge, I noticed something.
What's that?
In the main shop in Galaxy's Edge, the Black Spire shop, Doc Ondar's Den of Antiquities, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where you make the custom lightsabers. That's somewhere else. But they had what they call legacy lightsabers. It's the same kind of materials as the custom builds, except these are prefab versions of lightsabers seen in the films and the TV shows. Okay?
Right.
As I was staring at it, there was one that stuck out to me because I'd never seen it before. Well, I had, but not in front of me. It was a Temple Knight lightsaber handle. It was this yellow and or this gold and silver ornate thing.
And that's fold in half?
Sorry?
Does it fold in half?
No, actually it stuck out to me because as I was looking at it, I remember where I saw something like that from. Where I saw it, it was all silver, and it was on the cover to Star Wars #3. Remember that
lightsaber Luke was holding?
Yes, that weird yellow thing he was holding?
Huh.
It was the same handle. So I was staring at it just going, oh my god. I mean, I know Disney has been doing a lot of synergy when it comes to Star Wars and its various mediums. The custom lightsabers you build in Galaxy's Edge, you can recreate them in the video game. Jedi Fallen Order. I know that the comic books are filling in the gaps between movies and everything. And so are some of the TV shows. I just never really expected something that, as far as I knew, was just debuting in comics in a couple months to be sitting there right in front of my face already. It was a little bizarre, At the same time, though, in Star Wars #3, which I suppose it's already out. So, no, I guess what we were looking at was Star Wars 6 when it came to Luke Skywalker and that yellow saber. Star Wars number 3, an additional character has been frozen in Carbonite.
All right.
Well, the current comics take place between Return... No. The Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
So Han Solo is in Carbonite, probably on his way to Boba Fett, if not already in his palace. A small group of people...
Jabba, not Boba Fett.
Jabba, thank you. A small group of people on the got on the Millennium Falcon and decided to go to Cloud City to find out information as to how to defrost somebody from Carbonite. It was Lando, Chewbacca, Luke Skywalker, and Leia. Leia wanted to know more about the Carbonite process. Luke wanted to find his missing lightsaber. Lando was trying to figure out what happened to Lobot, the cyborg from The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Chewbacca, I imagine he was just there to fly. Anyway, while Leia was poking around some of the Carbonite modules, a couple stormtroopers found her. She tried to lie her way past it, but instead of buying the lie and being, stormtroopers, they pushed her into the pit and flicked the switch.
Really?
Yeah, at the end of issue number 3, there she is, in a very disturbing pose, frozen in Carbonite. Looks like she's silently screaming, even.
I guess that explains how she knows about the resurrection sickness.
I was about to say, if you're going to tell me this is how she knows how to defrost, it's like, I don't think she learned that from this part of the process.
No, just her. It's like, yeah, this process is kind of unkind, so this is going to happen.
Yeah. That makes the whole thing even more creepy and personal, though. The writer of the new X Factor series for Marvel Comics, Leah Williams, she reveals that there was a member of this cast she was actually afraid to tackle.
Really?
Yeah.
Which one?
Polaris. Lorna Dane.
Okay.
Williams said she was, quote, afraid to write her because of the character's intimidating legacy, unquote. I guess Williams just was afraid to step on the long history of Lorna Dane. She was introduced way back in, I want to say, the 70s. But to get over it, she actually talked to a group of her friends who loved the character to get a better sense as to how to write it and how to relate to the character. For those that don't know, X Factor is a new team of mutants being led by Northstar, who are tracking down missing mutants and working with the Five. This is the comic that evidently will also reveal secrets about the resurrection process that was introduced in the House of X in the middle of last year. Jordan White described this comic book as beta testing things on Krakoa. Quote, it's constructed in such a way that it really works as, it's got the internal engine that will make the book have to go all the time, unquote. The first issue... Sorry?
I'm not entirely sure what he's implying with that.
Oh, well, I guess that means X Factor is about to find out a lot of secrets about Krakoa they probably weren't looking for. X Factor number 1 is going on sale April 22nd. It's way closer than I thought. And there's a cover to one of the issues that indicates that X Factor is going to have more problems to deal with than I thought. It involves a group of the characters all in these noir-style outfits and poses.
Uh-huh.
On a bunch of screens, either in pairs or individually, and all the screens have the words Krakoa PD on them for some strange reason. Krakoa Police Department.
Uh-huh.
Except you notice there's one thing down in front of all these screens with its back to the reader. And it doesn't appear to have a spine, and it has a bunch of spidery robot legs.
Mojo?
Yeah, looks like Mojo is watching this team rather intently.
Oh, boy.
I wonder if he's going to get involved. Last we saw, Sinister was threatening Mojo to get free cable for Krakoa. I mean that quite literally.
I still find it hilarious.
It was weird to read. Will not lie. As a matter of fact, I read X-Men number 7 that went into a new process the mutants have to regain the powers of those who lost them as a result of M-Day. No More Mutants?
Mm-hmm.
Or the decimation as some people know it. And it's a process that's as hopeful as it is chilling. It's called the Crucible. Specifically, Melody Guthrie, who used to be known as Arrow, she had flight powers, went through it. She's one of Cannonball's sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, so the process evidently involves you relaxing quite a bit before you go through it. But once the Crucible begins, you are surrounded by the mutants in a makeshift pit or arena. And standing in this arena is Apocalypse.
All right.
The Crucible is made to test former mutants both physically and mentally to see if they want to regain their powers. Which sounds very up Apocalypse's alley, I gotta admit.
Yeah.
Except that test is physical. Whomever goes through the Crucible and Apocalypse both have swords. He repeatedly beat Melody Guthrie to the ground. And he was talking to her in a way that said at the same time, get up and don't get up. I think it's just one of those cases where everyone's trying to see where the decision lies. And after the third time she got up, Apocalypse finally raised that broadsword high and cut her down. You can guess where this is going from here.
Not entirely.
Well, after she's cut down, she's allowed to go through the resurrection process.
Oh.
And it's from there that her powers are finally restored. And as I was staring at this, it disturbs me a little bit. You have at least one mutant on the island that can warp reality. There's got to be a better way to do it than this. I discussed it with somebody else, and he just said, well, maybe it's dangerous to have one reality-warping mutant try to undo what a reality-warping character in the Scarlet Witch already did. Doesn't seem any more risky than what she already did. You know what I mean? This feels a bit barbaric.
You say it's physical, but I think it's a mental check of how far they're willing to go.
Well, like I said, it's both physical and mental. Still, though, does a person really have to die? It seems awfully bold, especially since there's no guarantee that people that go through the Crucible are necessarily looking to be combatants or X-Men. It seems like a big ask. And I was actually a little more disturbed by Nightcrawler after he witnessed Melody being resurrected and regaining her powers.
Uh-huh.
His response to this whole thing is, I need to make a mutant religion. I don't know how you have a cathartic moment watching something like that. That seems horrible to me. I understand the process as a concept. It still just feels very wrong.
I don't believe anyone on that island is qualified to create a mutant religion.
I would say not. It's another case where I'm kind of concerned in that it seems like the further the X-Men go down this road on Krakoa, the more disassociated they're becoming from the rest of human society, and that can't be a good thing. So I'm still reading.
You say that, but
what?
You say that, but I think that the powers that be, the head people in charge, just Xavier, Magneto, and Apocalypse, be down to the other members of the council. They're the big guys in charge. Well, I know at least two of them will be revel in the idea.
Maybe. I mean, they may be leaders, but this still has to pass with enough votes from the entirety of the council. That means other people voted on it. And considering Kate Pryde's death, that means they got the majority of 11 individuals, at least 6 people, that agree that this is a way to go. You can go ahead and ponder that, because I doubt we're going to find any answers here, but that's quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, there's a little bit more information about the Children of the Atom. These are the new group of young characters who are going to be emulating X-Men in apparently artificial means. The writer of the comic, Vita Ayala, went into a little more detail on it and said, quote, "Do you like my children? Clearly it is a team book, and I'm not sure I'm allowed to say what their names are. It is a book that's near and dear to my heart. I was asked, what would you do if you could be an X-Man? I said, I'm in my 30s, so it'd be really bad on my back. They're youngins, though. Their knees still work." Unquote. She described the team as mouthy, sarcastic Zoomers. Aspects of current culture is supposed to be explored through these characters. For example, one of these Children of the Atom is going to have a TikTok, and another is going to be a Twitch streamer. Ayala apparently wanted to explore contemporary fandom and show readers what it would be like if children today had a chance to be X-Men. I've seen a lot of people online when they read that description just kind of get down on it, but I think it's a good concept. It's a good window for newer readers to get a look at the X-Men without being bogged down by all the continuity.
To be honest, I'm kind of offended by the term Zoomer. I know it doesn't apply to me, but
is it? I thought. I mean, we're Generation Z. I'm positive of that, but I don't know what Zoomer is really.
Well, I was pretty sure I was Gen X or something like that.
Yeah. I just like it. It's a more contemporary look at the X-Men through the view of brand new characters. I'm not gonna sit here and say only the characters I like can be featured in comic books. I'm willing to try something new all the time. As long as the whole thing isn't about how to update your TikTok, I'm cool with that. Finally, when it came to announcements of C2E2, Marvel Comics announced the new X-Men crossover schedule for July, called X of Swords. It's the first X-Men crossover in the Dawn of X era. It's going to be a 15-part crossover being led by Jonathan Hickman that's going to tie into every available X-Men title. According to Hickman, quote, "One of the cool things we're able to do now, because we've established the X-line and really know where we're going, is that we're able to try some different things out. X of Swords will be an old-school crossover that meanders through the entire line. It's almost like chapters of a story," unquote. The press release for it compares X of Swords to the Mutant Massacre, Age of Apocalypse, and the Messiah Complex. If you haven't been reading comics for a while, those are three pretty notable X-Men crossovers. Evidently, further in the press release, it says here that X of Swords will feature 10 X-Men stepping up to defend Krakoa by arming themselves with new and familiar legendary blades from Marvel's vast history. We're promised that mutant kind will finally meet its mythical destiny. They also tease some major changes to the X-Men franchise going forward after that. I'm trying to figure out what kind of swords this could be, because there are some swords that the X-Men are very well associated with. Wolverine has a history with a Muramasa blade that can stop all healing factors. Magik has the Soul Sword, which is a ubiquitous weapon just for her. Captain Britain doesn't wield Excalibur, but she has her own Psychic Claymore. And then there's her brother, the original Captain Britain, who wields the Sword of Might. You see where I'm going with this?
Not really.
Well,
I'm very unfamiliar with swords within X-Men lore.
I guess the question I have, though, is if you're an X-Man, why do you have to fight specifically with a sword? Why are they stepping up with these legendary blades? What am I missing from this particular picture? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're very powerful characters. Why would they be limited to fighting with swords? There's a mystery to unravel here that I don't think is very obvious. When I first read the title, X of Swords, I thought it was like a take on the tarot. I know there are several cards that have swords associated with them that mean different things depending on how you read it.
Yeah, I thought more like playing cards, but yeah.
So, I mean, I know I will read it. I'm an X-Men mark. I just don't know how to take all this from the announcement. Next up is our DC comic news. We'll talk about the other major company in comics and what they're up to now and in the near future. There's been a little more information from the now sole publisher of DC Comics, Jim Lee, now that Dan Didio was removed as of almost 2 weeks ago. And he addressed a few things recently. He spoke at C2E2, and he told the audience, quote, "There's continually new things going on, and I look at being the sole publisher now and the team I'm working with much more in the trenches now than ever before. We've been with Warner Brothers for decades. The actual strategy for DC is to put publishing at the center of what we do. It's the engine of all the movies, TV, cartoons we do. And so it's my intent going forward as the publisher to lean into the collective years of my team. To address some of the stuff that's out there, there's rumors, speculation. I wouldn't put any credence into it. DC has been around for 85 years and will be around for another 85 years. I hope to be doing this panel in 85 years." Unquote. He also spoke a little bit about the 5th Generation Initiative and if it would constitute another reboot, to which Lee said, quote, "It's hard to talk about things we haven't announced. Intention not to do a line-wide reboot. Our focus in taking to editorial team is to continue what we've done best. Character-driven stories, pairing the right creators on the right characters, and developing characters that are inclusive and diverse, unquote. That's all fine in concept, but DC really has a problem getting readers to read their newer characters and or, offshoot series. If it's a Batman series, they'll read it. If it's a Superman series, they'll read it. Outside those, you really kind of got to push people to get into them. What do you think of his plan?
I can't speak to his plan. I can only speak to what I've seen so far, and it's, well, again, it might be a matter of preference on my part, but it's a lot of big words, and it's the mess that was left behind from the latest iteration that they've attempted is this.
Do you mean Rebirth or New 52?
Yes.
Okay.
And mainly, the reason for attempting this restart was legitimate because things kind of got out of hand prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
And when they did the time before, it kind of got out of hand. I'm starting to noticing a trend with DC.
Well, if you want to talk trends, we have to talk a bit about Dark Knight's Death Metal, the sequel to the Dark Knight's Metal event series. There was more information about that laid out at C2E2 this year. The writer of the series will be Scott Snyder, working with his longtime collaborator Greg Capullo. Snyder called the story The Anti-Crisis. He said that rather than remaking some aspect of DC continuity, it's going to reconcile DC's various eras into one narrative. He said, quote, "The thing I'd say about Death Metal is that it connects all the stuff you've read, from Crisis on Infinite Earths through Doomsday Clock and a couple more. I've been wanting to do this story since we finished Dark Knight's Metal. As much as it was a complete event, we left some threads hanging there for sure. I'd hope that if people like the first series enough, we get a chance to set up something bigger. And that's our plan for Death Metal." Unquote. The artist Greg Capullo added, quote, "For all of us, Dark Knight's Death Metal is about the fun factor. Comics should be fun, bombastic, and over the top. This series is going to be exciting and jam-packed with great metal-esque moments that'll make fans lose their minds when they see them." Unquote. I'm not sure how to feel about the idea that this is the Anti-Crisis, because when I think about that, I think about the Infinite Crisis, the event that mashed DC's multiverse into a single world by the end of it. So, I'm not quite feeling this as a unique event if all it's going to do is to reconcile the various parts of DC history. They've attempted that before, and then was eventually retconned anyway.
I'm not entirely sure what he means by anti-crisis, though.
Well, the Crisis on Infinite Earths pretty much laid out the different histories of DC up to that point as happening on different worlds. And then, now that they defined those different worlds, they made it possible for these characters from different eras, like the Justice League and the Justice Society of America, to actually meet each other. It wasn't possible before. So for this to be the Anti-Crisis, it would almost have to lock it down and create something definitive so that these characters either do or don't interact, period. This feels like the kind of series that could really mess up the fifth generation, though. Editorial would have to be on top of this, otherwise it's going to be the same kind of narrative weirdness. But supposedly this will resolve everything, including Doomsday Clock and the whole Justice Doom War with Perpetua. I guess the question is, how well do I need to know DC continuity to understand what Dark Knight's Death Metal may mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer to that. Warner Brothers and DC Comics are teaming up with a content creation and talent platform known as Tongle for the DC Ambassador Program. It actually started a couple days ago. It's running through March 9th. It's allowing what they call the biggest Batman and Wonder Woman fans early access to the new and exciting products and experiences. Fans are supposed to go to tongle.com/DC Ambassador to learn more about the offers that are being made available to DC superfans. Fans are supposed to submit a video highlighting their DC fandom for all things Batman and Wonder Woman. Then DC will announce an inaugural group of DC ambassadors as of April 13th, made up of 8 Batman and 7 Wonder Woman ambassadors. These people will be allowed to collaborate with DC to create timely social media content based on key moments and celebrations through the year. That content will then be shared across DC social media accounts. It sounds like a complicated version of guerrilla marketing. Supposedly, members in the ambassador program will get the chance to earn what they're calling money can't buy experiences. I guess that means something unique that's just not on sale to the general public, while commissioning sales through the Amazon Associates affiliate marketing program. It sounds to me like these fans are being told to hawk certain books and or storylines, and people that follow the links from their posts will be counted towards their total to possibly earn extra experiences or something.
I don't like this idea.
It does sound a bit exploitive.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm mischaracterizing it, but it does sound like you're asking your fans to do your marketing.
Well, I'm more worried about the people that get involved with the ambassadors, to be more honest.
I don't know. The problem is that I would have to be interested in these products to follow how the ambassadors are marketing it, and I can't say I'm the biggest Wonder Woman or Batman fan.
Well, again, I'm more worried about the ambassadors, how they're being kind of roped into this with really no control for themselves.
I don't know. I'll be curious how it develops. Submissions are currently ongoing until March 9th. Well, Leviathan Dawn #1 came out. This is the continuing tale of Leviathan, both the man and the organization, as kind of an anti-espionage unit within DC Comics. And it turns out that, to back up, during the event Leviathan miniseries, the Leviathan organization wiped out a number of the intelligence gathering operations in DC Comics, including Argus and the original body behind Task Force X, Checkmate, DEO, and Spiral. All of them were wiped completely off the map. However, now that Leviathan has risen, a brand new Checkmate has been put together to counteract Leviathan. And it actually has some interesting characters on the board. They have the current Manhunter. I forget her name. I want to say it's Kate Spencer. They also have Colonel Steve Trevor, Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow, Lois Lane, Talia al Ghul, a character known as the King, who apparently brought them together, the Original Question, and, God, I don't remember the name of the character. He is the walking skeleton that used to run one of the organizations.
Not familiar with the character.
I wasn't aware of him until Event Leviathan to begin with. But the lineup is kind of intriguing as far as a counterintelligence operation. That's an interesting group of characters.
Yeah.
Lois Lane playing a more active part in the DC universe intrigues me a bit.
I'd say about time.
It probably is. I mean, she would have information on most of the major players in the DC universe.
At least insight.
Yeah, it's just because of Superman revealing a secret identity to the world, I still question what kind of clout she would have left in DC. I would be amazed if she's just allowed to keep going on with business as usual. You would think somebody would have serious questions for her about what she knew when.
Well, maybe she couldn't progress as a reporter, but she could put those skills into other fields.
True, very true. A longtime Batman writer has been saying he's finally getting around to his final miniseries, and that's the longtime director Kevin Smith.
Huh.
He had a final miniseries for Batman, part of his a sequel to his original miniseries Widening Gyre, planned for release in 2014. But here we are in 2020, and it has yet to materialize. Kevin Smith told Newsarama, quote, "This red folder goes with me everywhere. It's got 3 issues of art with notes for me and Walter to go back into and finish. I've been carrying this folder for 2 years. It's not Walter's fault. He's free as hell. It's just a matter of me getting down to it. I feel incredibly bad because I did an entire different miniseries in the interim. Right after my heart attack, Mark Millar was like, 'Oh, hey, do you want to do Hit Girl?' And I was like, 'Oh, all right, Hit Girl.' Walter's done a lot of the art. The notes I've gotten Batman Bellicasi are just like, 'Ooh, we definitely need to add this because I want to move this over here and stuff. I will definitely get around to it,' unquote. That's a very Kevin Smith answer, touching on like 5 different subjects before he actually answered it. No, we read a little bit of Widening Gyre before, I think.
I don't recall.
No, I did. I read it on my own. I was curious after a couple of his podcasts. And I'm not going to say it's bad. It's a very different voice for a Batman comic. It was a little more honest. Not quite as I am the baddest man on the planet. It was a little more honest about his flaws and his problems. And because of that honesty, a lot of longtime Batman fans really dislike Widening Gyre. Widening Gyre, Kevin Smith wrote a scene where Batman peed himself.
Yeah.
It wasn't because he was scared. It was because a grenade went off in his vicinity and the concussive blast, kind of triggered his bladder. It was an accident.
Mm-hmm.
But still, people didn't like the idea that Batman would ever wet his tights. The newest Green Lantern in DC Comics has a very unique power ring. This came out of Far Sector number 4 by N.K. Jemisin and Jamal Campbell. And the Green Lantern of this series, Jo Mullein, her ring does not require a power battery.
Okay.
I mean, you know how Green Lanterns work. Their ring has a specific amount of charge in it, and they generally require to summon or carry a Green Lantern power battery so that they can recharge their ring.
Yeah.
She does not have a power battery. Evidently, her ring will charge itself over time. So she can't recharge it instantly like a lot of other people can. When she uses a lot of power, she has to wait for it to regain its energy. Which is interesting. It takes away one weakness while adding another, and it also makes her very unique among other Green Lanterns. Except the other difference between her ring and others is her ring has a half-life. When she was given her ring, she was told that it would be good for 1 year. She has 1 year to solve the issues inside the Far Sector that she's assigned to. And regardless as to whether or not she finishes it, that ring will run out of juice entirely in 1 year.
Oh, it's nice to put a clock in the story.
Well, it is a 12-issue maxi series as far as I know, and is currently on sale. Issue number 4 is already out. I do like the definitive storytelling in it. It'd almost be weird to have this new Green Lantern introduced just to find a way to dispose of her very quickly. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, I may have to back up and sit down and fully read this series. Meanwhile, the Suicide Squad lost one of its key members in a way that smacks of irony. Have you followed the new Suicide Squad series?
I have not.
Okay, so a bunch of the well-known Suicide Squatters have been paired up with a group called the Revolutionaries. They're under the guidance of a new general, and I'm sorry, I forget his name at the moment. It's something very simple, but I will go on. Anyway, in the first issue, there were 2 Fishman-like brothers, okay? Scale and Finn.
Mm-hmm.
Scale was ripped in half by King Shark the first time they met.
Mm-hmm.
And Finn is telepathic, so he's been taking this very seriously. As a matter of fact, in the fight, one of King Shark's teeth was knocked out, and Finn was wearing it as a necklace because he wanted to remember this. So on the very next mission, King Shark and Finn were supposed to approach their target aquatically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And King Shark kept making fun of Finn by telling him how good his brother tasted.
Oh.
So Finn took that tooth he had from around his neck, jammed it into King Shark's thigh, and then used his telepathic abilities to summon sharks. And because he stabbed King Shark, there was blood in the water. And not only was Finn that ironic about it, he also delved deep into King Shark's mind so that Shark can watch himself be devoured from Finn's point of view.
Wow.
Shark was a fatality as a result of this issue. He's gone. That's ironic and brutal. This issue was done by Tom Taylor with art by Bruno Redondo. And I've read the first 3 issues of this new iteration of the Suicide Squad.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I say that unironically. I like it. You know, it's kind of interesting watching the well-known Suicide Squatters try to interact with these new guys who play by a different playbook than they do, answering to a leader no one is sure about. And it's really weird to see that the current leader of the squad took over from Amanda Waller after the first issue, and you know how Harley Quinn likes to backtalk, and I don't mean like sassy backtalk. She just kind of speaks when she has something on her mind.
Yeah.
This general is just so unable to take Harley's random claptrap that he actually put Gorilla Tape over her mouth. She was fuming after that. As a matter of fact, in the following mission, during the issue where King Shark was eaten, Harley Quinn was told to stay behind and watch the ship with a couple of the newer guys by Deadshot, and when she asked why, it's just like, I need somebody I can trust to watch this thing. You trust me? Yeah, I know. That tells you how far we've fallen. It's an interesting book. I may put it up for you guys to check out just because, I like to figure out whether or not I'm crazy when I like something.
Sure.
Last up in DC comic news, one of the Black Label books is getting expanded in an unusual way. The creator of the Batman White Knight and the Curse of the White Knight miniseries, Sean Gordon Murphy, he's confirmed that his pseudo-Murphyverse is being turned into a full-on Murphyverse. He didn't provide an exact timeline, but he is the writer and artist on his own series, and he said on Twitter that more mini-stories will be detailed for Harley Quinn, Batgirl, and Nightwing within the universe that he has set up. He's going to be outlining the general direction of these adventures in Gotham, and DC is going to be announcing separate creative teams for all of the books he sets up. He's also confirmed that these minis will be set in between each volume of his White Knight series, which is currently being put out under the Black Label banner. So the Murphyverse is no longer a concept, it is an actuality. I find that curious. I've been enjoying these White Knight miniseries rather extremely. Of course, it's such an interesting deconstruction of Batman without making him look like the butt of the joke, Last up, we have general comic and convention news. This is where we talk about comic books that are not Marvel or DC related, as well as conventions happening all around the world. A comic book artist has just been added to TFCon in Orlando, Florida. This is happening March 20th through 22nd. And it's being presented by the Chosen Prime. They just added Joss Burcham, who's a comic artist and colorist on Robots in Disguise, Optimus Prime, and Star Trek vs. Transformers, as well as other series for IDW Comics. He's joining other creators at the convention in Orlando, Florida, like Bob Badansky, Greg Berger, Hal Rail, Venus Terzo, Victor Caroli, and Vince DiCola, among others. I would really like to meet a couple of major Transformers artists and get something from them in my gigantic memory book. It's just the timing never works out. Further on, C2E2, which happened this past weekend in Chicago, Illinois. ReedPop, the company that runs C2E2 as well as several other conventions, has plans for an expansion in both footprint and number of days. They're hoping to use more of the convention center that they usually find themselves in, which is specifically McCormick Place, in the upcoming years. And they want to expand the convention from a 3-day convention to 4 days. Evidently, in the past few years, C2E2 has been on the cusp of hitting 100,000 fans in attendance. That is impressive. Especially for a convention that's generally only big among comic fans. It's not as well known among casual fans like New York Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con. I would like to go to C2E2 at least once.
A lot of conventions I'd like to go to at least once.
It just feels like there's a lot going on there. And I would like to see how it goes. C2E2 also addressed the coronavirus concerns before the convention went on. ReedPop released a statement that said, quote, Reed Exhibitions is actively and continuously monitoring the COVID-19 virus outbreak in line with local, state, and federal authorities and public health advice. They are also following local, state, and federal public health advice closely, unquote. At the same time, they were weighing in Tom King and Mitch Gerads, the people who did the Heroes in Crisis miniseries. They weighed in on the coronavirus ahead of C2E2. And according to Tom King, quote, yeah, I really think shaking hands with fans is important to sort of saying thank you for everything. However, with all the news for your health and ours, we're going to do a no-touching, cool nods thing for the next bunch of signings. I appreciate you all for understanding, unquote. I get where he's coming from. There's a lot of creators out there that are having a fist bump only rule. And given the way things are going, that's a pretty good way to go. As a matter of fact, the coronavirus is really starting to affect convention plans in the U.S. DC Comics, as of just today, announced that all March convention plans, including Emerald City Comic Con, have been canceled. DC is not going to any conventions in the month of March. They released in a statement, quote, "As the health and safety of our employees are always our primary concerns, DC staffers will not be attending conventions during the month of March. Future convention attendance will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, factoring in the latest information from a variety of organizations, including the CDC, the World Health Organization, the U.S. State Department, and local health agencies," unquote. Actually, the day before, Warner Brothers also canceled the New York premiere for its Superman Red Sun animated film. That was scheduled to take place March 16th in New York City. Marvel plans for Emerald City Comic Con are unaffected because they had no plans for Emerald City Comic Con. As a matter of fact, that was the other convention that talked about pulling out of Emerald City Comic Con. Before they announced it, Dark Horse announced they are also not going to Emerald City. Their statement says, quote, "Due to the severity of the COVID-19 virus, Dark Horse Comics has made the difficult decision to pull out of Emerald City Comic Con 2020. It is with the safety and well-being of our staff and creators in mind that we have come to this decision. We appreciate your understanding, and we will see you at conventions later this year and at Emerald City Comic Con 2021, unquote.
I'm just waiting for something to come out of San Diego.
I don't know. It depends on how the next few months are going to go. There is still a good 4-month gap between now and San Diego Comic-Con. And I know the situation in China is considered on the bounce back right now. They're lifting a lot of the quarantines. The number of new cases is going down. So we'll have to see how it develops. I mean, Emerald City Comic-Con is under serious threat right now since when it comes to U.S. infections, there's a growing cluster of them in the Washington area, which is where Emerald City Comic-Con happens. So they may be feeling the pinch on this one a little more acutely than others.
Is there a possibility you might cancel it?
San Diego?
No, Emerald City.
That's an interesting question because they've had two major exhibitors pull out. However, I don't know what their overall footprint is. There's probably a very small number among the exhibitors. So I don't know what the plans for the convention are overall. They're probably still trying to understand it. It's interesting that you brought up San Diego Comic-Con, though, because Comic-Con International did announce the 4th wave of special guests for San Diego Comic-Con this year. The convention will be taking place July 22nd through 26th in San Diego, California. In addition to the guests previously announced, we have the writer and cartoonist on Narbonic and Skin Horse, Shane Garrity. The writer and artist on the Power Knights, Keithan Jones. A writer, editor, and publisher and author of 75 Years of DC Comics, Paul Levitz. The writer and creator of Winona Earp, Bo Smith. The writer of Changeling, Thor, and Becoming Superman, J. Michael Straczynski. And the writer of Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, Mariko Tamaki. All of these guests will receive a special 1-hour spotlight panel during the course of the weekend, as well as be available for signings and other events throughout the course of the weekend. According to San Diego Comic-Con blog, Comic-Con International is planning on announcing 6 additional guests next Monday. So that will be Wave 5. In a typical year, we usually hear, between 10 and 12 wave of guests?
Maybe a little more than that sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. So they are far from done when it comes to guest announcements. There is an artist right now that has a problem with another artist.
Who?
DC cover artist Francesco Mattina has found himself under fire by Alex Garner, another comic book artist. He's accusing Mattina of swiping his artwork and repurposing it for his own stuff. Garner pointed...
That's a big accusation.
It is a big accusation. Garner pointed out on Twitter that a cover that Mattina had recently done for The Flash looked very much like one he did for Marvel Comics character Nova during the Annihilation... Was it Conquest? No. Oh gosh, it was the most recent Annihilation series. I forget what it was called. But Garner did post on Twitter the two images, not side by side, but top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's close enough to raise some eyebrows and seriously question. I'm sending it to you right now so you can take a look. It is both Nova and the Flash in the same general pose. The legs are in somewhat different places because one's a runner and the other's a flyer. I think it's the arms and the position of the head that are the most curious. They're in frighteningly similar places. Matter of fact, the fists on both characters look almost identical. What do you think?
I'll be honest, if a lot of poses in comic books have people use a lot of the same poses in comics.
That's true, but again, you have a flyer and a runner in basically the same pose. That should not be occurring. Garner also released another image on Twitter of the two characters overlaid, and the overlay between the torsos is kind of disturbing. It is way too close. It definitely looks like Garner's work was used by Mattina, just leaned up a little bit.
I'd say it's a possibility they may have used the same rig or same puppet to draw off of.
Well, that shouldn't be possible. They're two different companies. That would be two companies sharing information they shouldn't be. And as a matter of fact...
No, that's not what... It's something... Maybe be using the same art tools.
Does it also matter that Mattina's been repeatedly accused of swiping art?
Actually, that does matter.
Yeah, in 2017, artist Lee Ji-hyung posted a series of images claiming Mattina copied an image he drew of Mary Jane Watson and repurposed it into a cover for Venom 120 to be sold as an exclusive at Orlando MegaCon. Then artist Walter O'Neill also said that Mattina took an image he drew of the Punisher and repurposed it as a variant cover for the Batman Who Laughs, The Grim Knight. This is not new for Mattina, unfortunately.
Oh, wow.
It's rather specific, don't you think? So, that's rather problematic.
I think someone needs to look into his work and demand something that... not demand,
I mean, this apparently is habitual. When Ji-hyung Lee raised his concerns about what Mattina did as far as his Venom cover, not long after that, Marvel Comics stopped allowing him to work for him. So apparently somebody at Marvel felt strongly enough that they decided to cancel his contract. As a matter of fact, the cover between the Grim Knight and the Grim Knight #1 and the Punisher, they don't look immediately the same, but it does look like Mattina spent a little while altering it, so he tried to make it look differently. Except, unfortunately, he left a pistol on the Punisher's hip completely intact. And it looks the exact same on the original artwork. It looks like it's time for an audit on Mattina's work, unfortunately.
Yeah.
IDW Comics is releasing a special edition of the Micronauts. They'll be re-releasing Michael Golden's Micronauts in an artist edition. It's going to collect the 6 complete issues with a cover gallery and more in a heart-size cover. You know, the Micronauts never really worked for me personally. I will admit that. The whole concept was basically a bunch of miniature superheroes in a microverse.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing wrong with it per se. It was just one of those things where it was cosmic and, kind of medium concept sci-fi when I was a kid. So I never really latched onto it. I am interested in the concept of it because it's Michael Golden. I mean, I've had a chance to talk to him personally during a few panels, and he's a nice guy. He's also the co-creator of Rogue, so he gets extra stars in my book. But I'd like to see it. I'm just not sure I'd like to own it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Also, going back to the coronavirus concerns for just a moment, San Diego Comic-Con has released a statement regarding their own response to the coronavirus.
Uh-huh.
And it was very short and sweet. It says, quote, Comic-Con is working with local officials as it pertains to the COVID-19 situation and continues to monitor developments closely, unquote. So they still don't seem to have any plans to change anything. However, several things have already occurred because of the coronavirus as it stands right now. CinemaCon in Las Vegas has already seen distributors from China back out of attending. Anime Japan 2020 was canceled entirely in Japan due to the infection rates in the country. This was supposed to take place in March. PlayStation, Microsoft, Epic Games, Electronic Arts, and other companies have also pulled out of the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, which is still taking place despite the city being under a state of emergency by the mayor London Breed due to fear of coronavirus outbreaks. So it's still unknown what steps San Diego Comic-Con will be taking or how serious of an issue the coronavirus will be at that point. It's just going to require watching. Last up in general comic and convention news, Mirka Andolfo is talking about Mercy, her new fantasy horror series from Image Comics. Mirka Andolfo has a history of interesting concept comics. She did an Italian series called Contro Natura. It was called Unnatural in Image Comics. She's also had recent work at DC on series like Teen Titans and DC's Bombshells, Hex Wives, and Ruby. Now she's going back to creating original characters with Mercy at Image Comics. It's a Victorian fantasy horror series that begins with a mix of mystery, a dose of damnation, and a story of redemption. Mercy's going to be in a mining village in Woodsboro, Washington. The first issue jumps from the past to the present day following a mine explosion leaving several people dead, including the husband of a character known as Lady Swanson. It's kind of an interesting start. It's been a while since I've read a good Victorian series. Andolfo's a really good artist. Her art is strangely manga-esque. I read most of her prior series, Unnatural, at least the English version of it that Image Comics released. It's good sci-fi. I would say, though, that it didn't finish as strong as it started. It almost felt like the story became kind of muddy and a little basic in the middle. So I'm willing to give it another shot, though. Maybe it was just the subject matter. We shall see. The subject of this week is Humanoid Comics Ignited. This is an original series from an independent publisher, Humanoid Comics. It is being written by Mark Waid and Kwanzaa Osiyefo, art by Phil Briones, colors by Andrew Crossley, and letters by A Larger World Studios. And this is one of those series that is very much grounded in the present. It revolves around a group of kids at a high school who suffered a school shooting towards the end of their prior school year. Now that the new school year started, not only are they adjusting to their new lives as victims, more or less, but also that a few random members of them seem to have gained superpowers through unknown means. What were your early impressions of this series, Jesse?
What were the point of the superpowers?
Well, that's something that has yet to be discovered. It's an ongoing series. It's not a mini.
I know that. It's like, if you, I just don't feel this. Again, this is the point of the superpowers is something I put a lot of thought into. Is why it's there. What reason does it help tell this story about the people who have been victims of the shooting? And I've only come to one conclusion, and that they are standing for guns, and I don't like that idea.
I didn't get that at all. As a matter of fact, I mean, most of the characters that develop powers had a rather strong anti-gun message, so I didn't get that at all.
Yeah, well, a lot of their powers can be done for good or ill simultaneously.
So how is that a stand-in for guns? I don't understand.
I don't know.
Well, I say that because it's like Mashup. Most of the times he uses his powers, it's either to disable weaponry or to create shields. Paper Doll, she reshapes things actively, if not flattens herself out into a two-dimensional plane. And then there was, oh my gosh, the Terror, who appears to be a psionic, really.
And then there's Viral, who can help people, can also make them severely ill.
Well, he more or less controls things on a microbiological scale. And I found the whole series rather interesting because it was people responding to trauma. The point of the series to me as it went along didn't really seem to be so much about the powers, just how people respond and communicate with each other.
You know, I got that part. I just don't see where the powers play into any of this.
Well, it's 5 issues deep on an ongoing series. It's too early to figure that out.
Yeah.
That was only one of the mysteries. Right now, it's more or less about their response and how they deal with the world thus far. And the world they're set up in with this Phoenix Academy, which is, as far as I can tell, not in Phoenix, Arizona, I was really interested in it because it was them trying to make sense of what happened to them before and how their lives have really been transformed. I mean, early on in this series, when the kids are returning to school and they're getting free transparent backpacks. Oh, jeez, man. That is such a sad statement. But it's a very relatable one because that's what's happened in several schools in America. Kids are given transparent backpacks. It almost seems like the answer is not really to help them solve problems. It's just to make it harder for them to potentially hide weapons.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of my problems come in lie. They're putting Band-Aids on. They're not trying to solve a real problem.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, that's not a fictional solve. That's what's happening in real world.
Yeah, and again, I find it take issue with that in the real world, too.
Yeah, but I was interested because the characters, or the multitude of students in this series respond in the varying ways that students typically do in a lot of situations. There are some who are just way too flippant about it because they happen to be the ones who are not shot. There's ones who overreact. There's ones that kind of retreat into a shell, and then there's others that get over-exuberant for no apparent reason other than overcompensation.
Mm-hmm.
And then early on in the first issue, one of the central characters here, I could never figure out how to pronounce her name.
Don't ask me.
Because it's spelled Anouk, and my first instinct is Anouk.
That's where my brain went.
I don't know if that had like a French or Asian twist, like a new, or what. I really didn't know the derivation of this name. I needed help here. Most of the others are fairly easy to understand as far as the ethnicities of their names. Hers was always a mystery to me.
Yeah.
But while Anu is sitting in her class, everybody gets a transmission on their cell phones and wireless devices from two people known as Viral and Wave, who are very evidently students because they're focused around the school. But they're unrecognizable because one's wearing a mask and the other one has a test pattern for a head. I wasn't sure how to read the test pattern at all. I was looking at that just going, that's creepy and distracting.
Mm-hmm.
But more or less, Anu and Wave are making a very severe statement because they've discovered that one of the plans to counteract future shootings is to arm the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, is something we're facing in the real world in America.
Yeah.
And Viral and Wave feel evidently about the same way I do as to the issue. Teachers already have a hard enough job trying to be babysitters and wranglers, and I'm not sure I want to give them a gun in that scenario.
I don't think that's going to solve anything.
No, but Viral and Wave say that the school administrators are full of poo, and if they don't change their mind on this policy, they're going to take the poo out of them somehow. And that sounds really personal.
It does. It also feels like a terrorist threat.
A bit, yeah. And the principal responded with misinformation. He claimed that somebody hijacked their new student warning network, which
Mm-hmm.
we find out later he attempted to get funding for, but it was denied. So it's really kind of a mystery how Viral and Wave could transmit this message so thoroughly without the technology to back it up. And again, it's more of a new walking through the halls, trying to figure out what just happened there. And I usually don't pay attention to a lot of background characters in comics, but in this one, it was really, really refreshing to see the various versions of high school students actively in the background, playing part, having bits of dialogue. They weren't entirely fleshed out characters, but they felt a lot more present in this comic than I'm used to. And then there was the flashbacks by various characters, which were just disheartening.
Yeah.
One character named Himari, who apparently is very evident in Anu's fascination with Viral and Wave, the flashback to her cowering in a corner while an automatic rifle apparently is being fired in her near vicinity. It wasn't just the image of her hunkered down. The shifting of colors to various shades of red really highlight the intensity of what this felt like for her. But when Anu wants to chase down Himari as to why she's asking so many questions, and Himari disappears into the wall.
Yeah.
That wasn't easy for me to understand. I got the gist of it, but I didn't understand the how.
Yeah, I was like, did she just walk into the wall?
Yeah.
Was it Link Between Worlds?
Yeah, it's actually even simpler than that. She can apparently just occasionally change her dimensional acuity so that she loses the third dimension. She goes completely flat. Undetectably flat. After that, we also get another flashback by a different character, Luther, who is kind of an old-school metalhead. If he dresses in any color other than black, he is very inauthentic. But it looked like he was surrounded by people when the gunfire went off. He's actually awoken by a nightmare, and when he comes downstairs, his dad and 3 of their buddies are dressed up like militiamen, and their apparent idea to keep the kids safe is to wander around the school with automatic rifles.
Yes, and they get the backing of his mother, who has to be the sheriff.
Yeah, and I can't say I'm a fan of this idea either when it comes to real-world politics. How about you?
No, this is absolutely wrong. As a sheriff, she should not endorse this, period.
No, I mean, some people may feel more secure about it, but you still have people with a private agenda wandering around school with an automatic rifle. That feels very unsafe to me. Especially since they're directly related to one of the students there. There's no way you could be fair and balanced in that situation. I don't know, dude. I always get worried when people talk about enhancing security in these ways for schools. Schools should not be prisons. So, to make a long story short, as Anu is getting ready for school the next day, Viral goes running by her, in mask and outfit and the whole thing. He's apparently running away because he noticed the volunteer militia with the sheriff walking onto school grounds. And
notably, everyone else on the premises freaking out.
Well, why wouldn't they? Nobody explained why these guys with guns were suddenly on campus. And after a school shooting, that has to be terrifying.
Yeah.
But Anu confronts Viral at the roof of the school, who is exactly who she suspects it is. Except Wave is standing next to him, or Wave surprises her from behind, and Wave is non-corporeal.
He is kind of a...
He's a living radio wave.
Yeah, he looks like those old school holograms.
Yeah, that's a good way to start it. It's not terribly well explained how, but it seems like somebody introduced something to the school around the time of the shooting. It wouldn't surprise me to later find out that the shooting was staged by whomever is responsible for evidently experimenting on some of the students.
That's one thing I'm kind of suspecting. Part of me is still not like that particular idea.
Well, everybody who developed powers saw some kind of purple or pinkish sparkling light.
Mm-hmm.
And not long after that, it almost seems like their various abilities developed based on the different stress receptors they were feeling at the time.
Yeah, stress or possibly environment.
Well, it wasn't necessarily environment. I mean, Himari wanted to disappear and get away. She suddenly went flat. Wave was focused on the radio because he was doing a student radio broadcast at the time. And his body transmuted into that. Viral was thinking about trying to help somebody who was shot when his powers kicked in, and it turns out he had the ability to genetically heal as well as create viruses. Basically, the impulse at the moment of exposure is what seems to guide what type of abilities these kids got.
Funny, I came up with an interesting idea with that years ago, but never wrote it down.
But still, though, all their powers seem to be very personal based on what they were feeling at the moment of exposure, which indicates to me some type of experimentation. It's too coincidental to be otherwise. Either way, though, Anu finds out that Viral and Wave really aren't working for any sort of anarchistic movement. They really do want to improve security in the school, but they're students, so they feel like people aren't listening to them. Everybody has an agenda as to what should happen next, But nobody's listening to the kids, which is another thing we do sadly well in America.
Mm-hmm.
And Anu makes a decision to assist Viral and Wave, even though she doesn't have any evident abilities. She saw the same type of lights they did, but she doesn't seem to have an ability, even though she details later in the series that a bullet came directly at her, apparently struck her in the forehead, but not with enough force to kill her. She assumed that because it went through two other students in front of her, it lost enough velocity to be lethal to her.
That's plausible?
It's plausible, and for a young lady in trauma, I totally buy that she would think that. It seems highly likely that there's something else at play, though. Because if it struck her hard enough to knock her down, you would think there'd be more of a wound on the center of her head. It didn't look like she suffered any serious effects from it other than the knockdown.
I'm rather surprised she's also kept it, too.
Yeah, and it was a flattened out bullet, too, wasn't it?
Well, not exactly. She's got the casing, which is supposed to be flattened, but that's not how a bullet looks.
Yeah.
It's just the casing. Yeah.
Yeah, there's got to be something else that happened that just hasn't been detailed in these 5 issues. And I'm not going to guess what it specifically is. I gotta admit, though, it was interesting when somebody came to flirt with Anu between class or after school that day. He wasn't getting the hint.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, Dale or Dave or something.
Yeah.
That's literally what she called him.
Yeah.
And as he's looming over this relatively monstrous individual, all of a sudden, Viral pretty much reaches up from behind, grabs him by the gonads, and squeezes. As well as, according to the Sparkle, may have used his abilities to make him somewhat ill, and I don't know what he could have done at that point.
I don't know. You grab hard up down there, that's going to knock down anyone.
Well, he didn't just grab. Like I said, there was that sparkle effect that indicates he may have dropped something in there. That's going to be personal, and it will probably burn for a while.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But as Anu and Viral are talking on their way outside school, the student body president is holding his own protest to arm the teachers. I feel like this. One of the reasons I like this comic book is because not only to me is it an interesting tale to tell in current America, but it's also the type of story that can foster a lot of conversations about schools in general. You know, what we do in certain events, what we can do after certain events, and how we can prevent certain events, you know?
Yeah, I think on the same time, it being too real is part of why I'm not enjoying this.
I always like it when my entertainment crosses over with real world aspects, because it creates a chance to converse about those things as well as to think of the alternatives.
Yeah, you know, I should enjoy that, but for some reason, this particular instance, I am finding an issue, and I can't pinpoint it.
Well, while the student body president is protesting, is when Luther, in his own mask, shows up in a modified SUV that has some kind of bizarre clutched together plated armor over it.
Mm-hmm.
And he fires from a cannon a bunch of origami birds, which are sparkly and look cute, but when people reach up to grab them, they're razor sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at this, and I didn't look at this and say, this is an attack. I looked at this and said, somebody had great intentions, but does not know what they're doing.
Yeah, it took me a while to understand what's going on in Ray. It's like, he made these out of the things he can manipulate, and they are sharp.
Really? Because I assumed this was Himari working through him. Paper Doll. I think she made these.
Was she on his back?
Yes, she was. She was hidden on his back during this period. Because she was with him throughout this, but Himari is not an offensive character.
It's still, I didn't think, you know, with the I suppose it just yeah, there she is. No, it just felt like it felt more of I know he meant good intentions, but from everyone else's perspective, that feels like an attack.
Yeah. I don't think he intended to cause panic. He might have just wanted to create energy. It was one of those cases where it's what happens when you're young. You do something with the absolute best of intentions. You do it with 100%, and it turns out you need to dial it down to about 75.
Yeah,
it happens to all of us,
it would
unfortunately.
have been a lot better if it was that thing was just a confetti cannon.
Yep. Yep. The beginning of issue number 3 starts with Himari evidently using her abilities to bend objects with her will into origami shapes to destroy a bunch of weapons in a gun shop.
Hmm.
Not condoning any particular action, but I mean, this is a young lady in trauma who is using her newfound abilities to act against her trauma, unfortunately.
Hmm.
But she was stopped by the shop owner who held a pistol on her and took a shot because he didn't understand what he was looking at. And I kind of felt for both of them because the shop owner is defending his business, but Himari is trying to make the world better, yet at the same time scared out of her mind. That last panel on that page where she rolled a tear, I felt bad for her.
Hmm.
She's trying to process a lot of things that are hard for anybody to understand. Meanwhile, a new Viral and Luthor are being held up by the police, the sheriff's department.
Hmm.
And it turns out Wave, who is still incorporeal and won't let people see him, uses his abilities to overload the police's radios. I don't quite understand how he was able to overload the police lights. He caused those to shatter and explode as well. The computer I got, the radios I got, the lights, do those receive radio signals? Have I missed some part of recent technology?
Uh, uh, Not entirely sure. I think he just this a surge of energy. I mean, if he's affecting electronics, he can just send power through whatever they're connected to.
Okay. With a distraction, the other powered kids manage to run and duck down around some cars so they can take off their masks and blend in with the others. I did like when Luther's mom, the sheriff, showed up to inspect this weird makeshift tank. As soon as she touched it, it fell apart. You know, it looks like Luther's powers require some active concentration to keep its shape. And once they finally hide is when Himari reveals herself to have been Luther's partner hiding in his shirt, more or less, or on the back of it. I gotta admit, Anu and Viral, when they saw her pop out of that, I loved their reactions because they were so freaked out.
Hmm.
I totally, as somebody who would be excited with the prospect of superpowers or superpowered individuals, yeah, I believe I would also need a change of shorts at that point. But yeah, they find out Himari has the ability to change things shape, and Luther has the ability to forcibly mash things together. I guess would be the right words for it.
Hmm.
During the shooting, he was talking with somebody in the music room, and while they were under attack, his powers kicked in, and a drum set formed into a shield barrier, especially because of all the symbols in front of him. The percussion symbols, not like emojis or anything.
Hmm.
I just want to clarify. So this little brotherhood of powered individuals is now up to 5 people who are still trying to puzzle together what could have happened. A news story about what happened to her and whether or not she anything special happened to her. She saw the same lights, but yeah, I'm convinced that something extra happened. I just don't know what. It was really kind of cathartic to watch them sit down and talk about all the things that they were going through because just like a lot of people, they're trying their best to understand it with the resources they have.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, one of the last things that happens at the end of issue 3 is they find out that another militia group is offering to keep the school safe, not just from shooters, but from active, powered individuals. And unfortunately, they are a group of people that call themselves. Let me see. Is their name on here? No, it's not on this page. But basically, they're a bunch of armed activists who have a lot of far-right ideology.
Yeah.
You know, they keep talking about the March for Mercy and the ultimate solution. That's not very subtle. And I'm sure that's the writer's intent. They don't exactly have dialogue bubbles where you can show inflection, context, and intent. But it's another scary thing that happens in America. We sometimes get armed people who say they have one agenda, but often have another that show up to these types of things.
Hmm.
And in issue 4 is where we meet the 6th of these powered individuals. And her being a Latina, she has some notable issues when it comes to immigration issues. Again, in America, very understandable. Yeah. Very understandable.
Honestly, her introduction kind of gave me hope that we might be getting toward the problematic part of all of this that I wish they would cover.
And that is?
It's people are causing all these problems, not the damn guns.
Well, that's the essential problem. But I always find problems like this are multifaceted. Because while people may be the ones who are enacting these things, and I know the argument that you can't fault guns because they're a tool, there is really an argument that to be had about removing enough items from someone's toolbox where they're no longer dangerous.
Now, here's the thing: a person determined enough will find a tool.
They will, but that also doesn't mean that you can't limit the possibility of the damage. I mean, I've never heard of anyone reloading their knife.
There are other ways. I don't want to get into this debate.
Like I said, you'll never be able to reduce damage to zero, but that also doesn't mean that you have to let dangerous things remain. But the fourth issue primarily has to do with the armed militia. The fifth issue is really kind of a turning point in this because we find out that there is at least one party behind the scenes who may be directing things, as well as the identities of these wannabe superheroes being posted on the internet. They were actively doxxed. Somebody put out their private information, and they have yet to discover who. But at the same time, we've discovered that a psychologist that a lot of the students saw after the shooting, not only is she superpowered, but she was using her abilities, which are very likely to be psychic or hypnotic in nature, to prevent people who either saw the lights or have abilities of their own from talking about it in general. I believe her name was Dr. Choi. She has some kind of agenda that I would love to know more about. Unfortunately, though, the doxing kind of creates a different problem in that the superpower teens start to argue amongst themselves. There was the argument as to whether or not they should have seen the mysterious motorcyclist and immediately taken his head off, or just tried to capture him, or even talk to him. None of which are really bad solutions. It's just you never know which one you're going to need at a given moment. And unfortunately, the argument causes Wave to overcharge just about everything in Himari's house, as well as the revelation that Wave's form is breaking down. His half-life is starting to dissipate. Because unfortunately, with Wave being non-corporeal, there really isn't a containment vessel for him. It's kind of a scary prospect. But by the end of this 5 issues, I gotta admit, I was really impressed by this comic. It tackles a lot of complicated things without giving any sort of right or wrong answer. It's thought-provoking, and that's what I really enjoyed. But then again, I like complicated things.
Yeah, I think that I think the high complexity of this is what's really getting me. I like my things be a bit more simple, well, not absolutely simple, but a lot simpler than this. Again, this does promote talks and conversations. The Let's put my thoughts together. I'm not huffing at this. The dialogue between all the characters is well written. It's great. I love the characters. The interactions between them is great. I just have problems with why the superpowers need to be involved with this story. And I know I have to wait. This is a long form storytelling.
Well, it's not just long-form storytelling. I don't think the powers are an allegory for guns as you presented before. I think they're an allegory for activism. Because activism is a long, drawn-out process. The powers are the way for the characters to kind of cut short that process and get to the heart of the matters rather than beat around it or spend time convincing people of things. Kind of like how Batman deals with crime.
Or trying to wrap my head around what you said, and to be honest, it's like what I know about this and what little knowledge I know about this is very it's kind of hurting me on this one. It's just I am one of those that's just that it is. Sadly, I am one of those that's kind of out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, and I know that's not a good way to approach a lot of things.
I'm a chronic overthinker, so I'm always thirsty for information as to form opinions and form dialogues, and this was just right up my alley. It caused me to sit down and think about things not just from a personal standpoint, but also kind of a generational one. It's similar to the concept of Marvel's Outlawed event upcoming, in that we often believe that teenagers should be capable of a lot more than they do, except somehow at the same time we also think they should take on a lot less than they try. Being a teenager is very frustrating in this country. And these characters dealt with a lot of the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, they were the ones who were traumatized the most, yet everyone kept jumping into their school, telling them how they should solve the issues, instead of actually asking any of them what could be done. It's fucking terrible. But still believable compared to our contemporary culture.
Mm-hmm.
So that made it even harder.
Yeah.
If I find out Humanoid does a collected volume of this, I would gladly pick it up. I mean, man, I would put this on a shelf anywhere.
I'm not saying this is objectively bad. No, this is probably a great read but in anyone's hands, it's not for me.
You know, I would like to get to the point that we saw at the beginning of the first issue, which apparently is a flash forward where they take that shot jock's house and just rip it up. I would like to know the story behind that.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering when we were going to get to that.
Yeah, it feels like it's coming relatively soon. It needs a little more development. But I think we're getting to that point, especially since the scene at the very beginning, none of them were wearing masks, indicating that their identities were already out and doxed. So I'm curious to know more. There's 7 issues out right now, and I do want to read 6 and 7 and see how the story develops. I want to see how they do. But that is neither here nor there. So, do you have any suggestions for next week?
Not at the. No, not really.
Okay, because based on some of the stuff that we saw or we talked about late last week, I actually had a weird suggestion for next week.
What's that?
I would like to read the miniseries tie-in for Punisher regards to War of the Realms.
Okay.
You know, it's not the one that we laughed at necessarily, but there's something interesting about the story of Frank Castle as a soldier and a non-powered individual running around this war of gods. I would like to know how he fared.
Well, I'm pretty sure he fared well enough.
Well, he sort of did, but if I remember the basic story correctly, what he found was a group of civilians in New York who were trying to get out of the battle zone, and instead of actively engaging in the war with the rest of the heroes, he took it upon himself to escort them out of the war zone. Which is not exactly the Punisher's forte.
No, with his military background, that's something he would do.
Maybe, but he's also rather ill-equipped. I mean, these are
True.
Norse characters we're talking about. So I would like to know how that story developed, how it went. Obviously, he came out fine, but who else came out okay? Because I can't imagine this went perfectly well. This feels like an Alien sequel in the making, you know?
No one's going to come out fine when they run across Frank Castle.
Absolutely true. But it felt like a good series to offer.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So next week it'll be the Punisher War of the Realms tie-in. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and I hope you found something you'll enjoy in this one. Have a great one. I am Jeremy.
And I am Jesse.
The Cosmic Library is now closed.
This podcast is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.